Welcome back to Whence, a Masonic podcast featuring research papers and discussions related to Freemasonry. Here's your host, Brother Robert Johnson.
Welcome back. This is episode 359. Kind of hard to believe that in just 44 to 45 weeks, we will have completed 400 episodes of this show. The Whence podcast is brought to you through the generous support of Masonic Revival, contemporary Masonic designs made for today's Freemason. You don't have to settle for throwing a plain old square and compass on anything anymore. Now you get something truly designed and truly wonderful. Whether it's aprons, awesome pins, and wonderful neckwear, bow ties, pocket squares, you name it, Masonic Revival has it. Head on over to MasonicRevival.com and check out what they have to offer, and make sure if you see Brother Edgar, tell him thanks for helping bring this program to all of you. And this program is also brought to you by all of you, those of you who support this program. We can't do it without you and your donations and all of your assistance, so thank you so much. To find out more about how you can assist this program, head on over to wcypodcast.com and click on Support the Show. There you can make direct donations, sign up to be a monthly contributor, a fellow, or even a producer. And thanks very much to everybody for donating. Now, the first piece we have for you this week is a little bit of history on a tradition that is not always seen or even made to be anything at all unless you get into some of the higher degrees here in the United States. So for you now, I would like to read the piece on The Mason's Mark by Wallace M. Gage, Past Master, from the Main Lodge of Research. A recent tour of England and Scotland included visits to the beautiful and stately Salisbury Cathedral, York Minster, Westminster Abbey, and Roslin Chapel and Melrose Abbey. All had many quote-unquote Mason marks carved into the stones and can be found in many other buildings still standing in Europe and the British Isles. These old Masons' marks help us to trace Freemasonry's story from the early operative days to present, when it is used in a symbolic sense in the first capitular degrees of the York Rite. Putting aside the legends from the old Gothic constitutions perpetuated in our present-day rituals, which purport to trace Masonry from the building of King Solomon's Temple to Noah's Flood or to Cain and Abel, Masonic students in the last century or so have been able to document fairly accurately the evolution of Freemasonry as far back as the mid-14th century, when the first attempt was made to organize the Masons' trade in England and to establish work rules for its government. Our modern Freemasonry is an outgrowth of those operative Masons of the Middle Ages, the builders of those ornate and beautiful examples of the Gothic school of architecture unsurpassed in the builder's art. The Mason's mark has been found on structures far older than these, however, some going back to 2500 BCE. Little attention was paid to these carvings until 1841, when a British archaeologist published an article on his studies. Masonic students took an interest in the subject and parceled the link formed between operative and speculative Masonry. It is surprising how long a thing may remain unnoticed until it has first been discovered. When a number of Masons' marks were pointed out to an old priest, he remarked, quote, "I have walked through this church for many times a day, 28 times a week, and never noticed one of them. Now I cannot look anywhere but they flit into my eyes." End quote. The operative Mason's mark was used for purely practical purposes. During the period when most cathedrals, abbeys, and monasteries were built, there were few who could read or write. When he became a fellowcraft or journeyman, each Mason selected his mark or design, which was his for life, and was never to be changed. The mark thus served as a signature. He cut it into each stone that he prepared, so that he might be given credit and receive wages for his labor, and also to be held responsible for the quality and proper execution of the work. The Mason's mark has a similar objective to a trademarking by assigning responsibility for quality of work. During the Middle Ages, the Roman Catholic Church dominated the religious scene in Europe and Britain, and most of the work done by the operative Masons of the day was constructed of cathedrals, abbeys, and monasteries for the Church. With the coming of the Protestant Reformation in 1517, however, the Roman Church lost much of its temporal power and influence, and the building of religious works fell off sharply. The operative Mason found themselves facing increased unemployment. Fewer apprentices were accepted to learn the trade, and work for the masons left was limited largely to a military construction and repair work requiring lesser skills. This period of operative decline was the beginning of a gradual change from guilds of builders to the moral and philosophical fraternity which today we call speculative masonry. Returning our attention to the mason's mark, we find an early reference to it in the German Thurgau Statutes of 1462. They note that on becoming a journeyman equivalent of the fellowcraft, the mason, quote, took his mark at a solemn admission feast, end quote. Later in Scotland, in 1598, the so-called Shaw Statutes were placed in effect. A set of rules governing the operative mason's trade were issued by William Shaw, master of the work of King James VI of Scotland. These contain the first known reference to the mason's mark in the English-Scottish area from whence our present-day Freemasonry has descended. These statutes say, quote, that no master or fellow or of craft be received or admitted without being 6 masters and 2 entered apprentices present, the warden of that lodge being one of the 6, and that the day of receiving of the said fellow of craft or master be properly booked and his name and mark inserted in the said book. End quote. The newly passed fellowcraft had to pay the lodge 1 Scots mark for such registration. The fellowcraft was journeyman, fully qualified to do mason's work, and the master was a contractor or employer of fellowcrafts and who could take apprentices for training. In 1634, an event took place which was to profoundly affect the future of the craft. The minutes of the Scottish Lodge at Edinburgh, Mary's Chapel, for July 1st, 1634, notes that Lord Alexander, Viscount, Canada, Sir Anthony Alexander and Sir Alexander Starkin, Bart, were admitted members of the lodge. This is the earliest record of the admission of non-operatives into a lodge in Scotland or England, and it turned out to be the opening wedge in the transition from operative to speculative masonry. The earliest minutes of the lodge are dated July 31st, 1599, and show the mason's mark used in conjunction with the signature of the members present. By the following year, many marks appear in the minutes, sometimes unaccompanied by signature. Minutes of other Scottish lodges also show the use of the mark, undoubtedly in conformance with the Shaw Statutes requirement. Following the admission of the 3 non-operatives noted above, the practice spread rapidly. In a period of decline for operatives, more and more non-operatives came to be accepted as members by most lodges, and the character of masonry underwent increasingly rapid change. By 1670, for example, the lodge at Aberdeen shows minutes signed by some 49 members, about 3/4 of whom were non-operatives. Noteworthy was the fact that all but 2 had marks shown beside their names, indicating that the practice of choosing a mark was not restricted to the operatives. During this period, when activities are well documented in Scotland, English records are scarce regarding acceptance of non-operatives, and make no reference at all to the use of a mason's mark. This dearth of records makes it difficult to do more than guess at the chain of events which immediately preceded the most important event of all, formation of the First Grand Lodge by 4 old lodges in London in 1717, generally accepted as the historical dividing line between operative and speculative masonry. A note to the listener, at this point I just think it is prudent to let you all know that, of course, if you have listened to past episodes, you know that the date in 1717 is and has been critiqued. Back to the paper. It established the basis of organizational pattern followed by all regular Masonic jurisdictions everywhere. Ireland followed suit, forming its own Grand Lodge in 1725, and Scotland likewise in 1736. At that time, English lodges were almost entirely made up of non-operatives, while in Scotland the operatives were still strong but waning rapidly. Ritual played a relatively minor part in operative masonry, but with the transition to speculative it developed and expanded and soon came to play an important role. We know little of it until the publication of the first of many exposés in 1724. None of them had anything to say about the mason's mark, and the first indication we have of ceremony or degree being connected with it is in the September 1st, 1769 minutes of Phoenix Royal Arch Chapter of Plymouth, England, where it states that 6 members were made Mark Masons and Mark Master Masons, and each quote-unquote chose their mark. While the mark had been used in Scotland for many years, the first time we hear of its ceremonial aspect is in the records of St. John Operative Lodge, Banff, on July 7th, 1778. There is strong evidence that the mark degree was worked in America as early as 1782, although documentary proof is lacking. The development of the Mark Master Mason degree to its present-day status is a story in itself. At various times it has been conferred in craft lodges by the Scottish Rite, by the Royal Arch chapters, by Templar encampments, and by independent Mark lodges. In America, the degree was gradually absorbed by the Royal Arch early in the 19th century. Over the years, there have been other degrees based on the marks, such as the Mark Man, Mark and Link, Fugitive Mark, Black Mark, and others, but these have disappeared, leaving only the Mark Master Mason. Although the ritual varies somewhat in different jurisdictions, they are basically similar. As the ritual of the Mark Master Mason degree developed, the Mason's mark came to take a somewhat subordinate role to the keystone and the theme of the building of King Solomon's Temple. The mark degree now is a requirement for candidates for the Royal Arch degree in the United States, Ireland, and Scotland. The United Grand Lodge of England at one time voted to recognize the mark degree as a quote-unquote graceful addition to the Fellowcraft degree, but soon reversed itself, which led to the formation of the Grand Lodge of Mark Master Masons of England, Wales, and the Dominions and Dependencies of the British Crown in 1856, which today has some 1,200 mark lodges under its jurisdiction. Only in Scotland is the mark degree recognized as part of craft masonry. It may be, and usually is, conferred on Master Masons in a symbolic lodge. It is also a requirement for the Royal Arch degree, and the degree may be conferred in the Royal Arch chapter if the candidate has not already received it in the lodge. Our ritual for the 3 craft degrees is clearly based on the practices of operative masonry, with symbolic usage of the working tools, the ashlars, the trestle board, lessons in architecture, and many others. Why the Mason's mark and operative practice from the time immemorial should have been omitted in favor of such things as the anchor and arc, the beehive, etc. is difficult to understand. A possible explanation may be that most of those who composed our early ritual were English, who may well have been unaware of the mark in the operative scheme of things. Only in Scotland has it received recognition and been given its rightful place as a part of craft masonry. Our Mason's mark is the Masonic equivalent of our signature. It represents our name, our character, our integrity, and our skills. When we sign our name or apply our mark to a document, letter, painting, or to a stone for the building of a cathedral, we stand up to be counted. By it, we say, in effect, this is where I stand, this is my work, I guarantee its quality, and I am proud of the workmanship it shows. In addition to our own Mason's mark, we have a responsibility in regard to that best-known Mason's mark of them all, the square and compasses. Almost all of us wear it or otherwise display it, thus identifying ourselves as Masons to all we come in contact with. In doing so, we cannot help but project an image of Masonry to the public. When we wear this Mason's mark, the square and compasses, the world will judge the craft by our words and actions. Should we feel unable to live up to the tenets and principles Freemasonry stands for, we would be well advised to leave the Masonic ring or pin in the dresser drawer, rather than damage the good name of the fraternity. It seems to be human nature for us to want to leave some sort of memorial that future generations will know we passed this way. We find this in graffiti scrawled on the walls of Pompeii and in Egypt and on the subway cars in modern cities. It shows in the initials carved in old-school desks and in the quote-unquote John Loves Mary cut into the tree trunks, and in the Kilroy was here of World War II. We sometimes hear it said of a person that quote-unquote he left his mark, meaning he made a lasting impression on some instruction or field of endeavor. Yet there are varying kinds of marks left. George Washington and Thomas Edison most certainly left their marks on our society and civilization, but so did Hitler and Stalin. All of us can't be Washingtons or Edisons, but we can contribute toward the building of a better world. Our ancient operative ancestor, in cutting his mark on stone for Salisbury Cathedral, left a memorial which says, quote, I had a part in building this beautiful house of God, end quote. By being better citizens, better husbands, better fathers, we can leave our mark on society by discharging our responsibilities to God, to our country, to our neighbor, and to ourselves. In our vocations, in our daily lives, and in our dealings with our fellow man, let's do our best to leave our marks only on good work, true work, square work, just such work as is wanted for the building of the temple. All right, I hope you enjoyed that piece. It was similar, or at least reminiscent of possibly another paper I've read in the past. And after 356 episodes, I am archiving the papers as we record them. And I didn't see this paper as one we have read before, but it sure seemed familiar. Maybe we did read it before, but in any case, I thought it was a great piece, and I think it's really interesting how we leave a mark in a lot of what we do. I certainly, whenever I craft something, I leave my mark on it. A great friend and brother, Spencer Hamann, who I have just the absolute most respect for, is a luthier by trade, a violin maker, repairer, a restorer, and he has his mark that he leaves on things. Although he is not a mark master mason, he just leaves a really cool mark. So maybe it's something that is universal in craftsmanship. It's just something that craftsmen do when they create something. So really cool. Let me know if you guys leave your mark on things. Shoot me a line on the Facebook page or in the comment section of the YouTube video, or just shoot me an email. Let me know the unique ways you use your mark. All right, now before we go further, I do want to mention next week on the program, I've got a really special guest coming on the program. I've got Dago Rodriguez from the Southern California Research Lodge. Now, just recently, these guys went ahead and published the latest issue of the Fraternal Review, which is their magazine. They put together a really interesting survey, and I got a press release, and I texted Dago and I said, hey man, can I get you on the program to talk about the results? Now, essentially what's happened is the Fraternal Review named the top esoteric Masonic authors as voted by its readers. So they have top 10 Masonic authors, living and deceased, whose esoteric writings have made a significant contribution to the world of Masonry. The list is based on a poll of their subscribers and some notable Masonic scholars taken this last spring. So this is going to be a really interesting interview, and I hope you guys all tune in next week to check this one out. Now comes the point in the show where I ask you to help support this show. How do we do that? Well, we have a bunch of different ways to do that today. If you head on over to wcypodcast.com, you can click on direct donation through PayPal, which we briefly touched on in the beginning of the program. Of course, you can make that one-time donation, or you can sign up to be a monthly contributor. Contributing $2 a month, $5, or even $10 a month, whatever you choose, really helps the program out. Of course, we have a limited edition shop where you can pick up any number of items that come direct from us. Help us out by going to MasonicRevival.com, but also we have some other affiliates that are really important. Banker's Best, one of the most unique things we've ever done, is to work with Brother Levi Banker out of St. Louis, who owns his own company called Banker's Best Beard and Skincare. He's been so generous. If you head to wcypodcast.com, click on More, then click on Banker's Best, and you can check out a bunch of the different products he's got. He's got a whole line of beard care products, skin care, oils, balms, all of this stuff, and he has been doing it a long time. He knows a lot about it. Everything is handmade, quality items. We even came up with the King Solomon's Reserve Beard Balm, which is a few years old now, but remains one of the great products that he still offers. Even the artwork on the bottle was done by a brother. The nice thing about this particular product is 50% of the proceeds come back to the program. If you're a history guy like me, then you'll be pleased to know that what makes the beard oil and balm very special is that it was made utilizing the fragrances specific to the exports of King Solomon's time and location, which is amazing. So black fig and honey is the formula. Luxurious scent, as Levi says, truly fit for our first Grand Master. If you use the promo code BBWCY357 at checkout, you'll also get a little bit of a percentage off. Please check that out. Banker's Best, or just head on over to buybankersbest.com. We also have a code with On It. You can go to our website, click on More, then go to On It, and you can click through any of the links here, or just go to onit.com and use the promo code WCY at checkout. You'll get 10% off, and they'll send a little bit back to the program to help us out. And of course, it's business time. The book that I wrote with John T. Ruark, it is making some real waves, and people are using it, and seeing success. So check that out on Amazon. You can click right to it. You can get it on Audible, Kindle, or in print, even on iBooks. And last but not least, I want to ask you to check out the Great Books program. You'll see the banner for it on the left-hand side, Intellectual Linear Progression. Use the promo code WCY, or you can just click on that link there, and you'll actually go right to the website and hear a little bit from Scott Hambrick about how awesome the program is. So that's it. I hope you guys enjoy, and thank you so much for helping us out. The next piece I have for you just ran on the Midnight Freemasons like 3 days ago, and actually at the time I'm recording this, it hasn't run yet, but it is a great piece, and it's called The Centralia Caper by Midnight Freemason contributor Stephen L. Harrison, 33rd degree fellow of the Missouri Lodge of Research. In the winter of 1932, the members of Centralia Council No. 34, located in Central, as the name might suggest, in Missouri, decided it was time for a little housekeeping. With 191 members on its rolls, several were significantly delinquent in dues payments, and it was time to suspend their memberships. In any Masonic body, suspending members is always a significant issue, not taken lightly. Still, retaining members who are no longer paying dues becomes a financial issue, as that body remains under obligation to pay the per capita dues for each of them. During that era, in Missouri, per capita payments were a hotbed issue, and when are they not a hotbed issue? Already, a bylaws amendment was in the works to reduce the quote-unquote tax to 50 cents from the quote-unquote outrageous level of 70 cents, about $9.80 in today's funds. By their action, there is no doubt the members of Centralia overwhelmingly supported this amendment and probably felt it didn't go far enough. At the council's December meeting, companions voted to suspend 76 delinquent members, saving a whopping $53.20, or $745 today. That's when the caper began to brew. A year later, in early 1933, the Grand Council Secretary Ray Denslow received the membership returns from Centralia. The report showed on December 31st, Centralia Council had suspended 191 members, showing a total membership of 0. Accordingly, Centralia owed nothing in the form of per capita payments to the Grand Council, saving it over $80, or $1,127 today. It should have owed for the remaining 115 legitimate members. The creative antics of Centralia companions turned up the heat at the Grand Council session the following April in St. Louis. Ralph T. Finley, Grand Master of the Grand Council, would have none of it. He said in his ruling on the matter, quote, "It appears that one council, Centralia, suspended 191 members in December of 1932. The 1933 report of said council shows that 115 of said suspended companions were reinstated in January 1933, but no per capita tax was paid thereon. I have held that per capita tax on such reinstated members should have been paid. The meaning and intent of the law is that per capita dues shall be collected on all members for each year for which such members pay subordinate dues. When a companion, after suspension, pays his dues, he does not become a member merely from the time that he pays his dues, but he is reinstated so that his membership relates back through the period of his suspension. To hold otherwise than that per capita dues are payable on reinstated members would place the Grand Council at the mercy of the subordinate councils. It would be possible for every council in the state to suspend all of its members in December and reinstate them in January without the payment of any per capita dues whatever. The protection of the Grand Council and indirectly the protection of every council in the state demands that our law and custom be construed to require that per capita dues be paid upon reinstated members. To add insult to injury, the poor Centralia companions, the amendment to reduce the per capita assessment failed. Still, nice try, Centralia. One final thing. Grand Master Finley was a member of Centralia Council, so during his term he was, in fact, suspended from December until early January. Stephen L. Harrison, 33rd degree. If you like things like this, and you like the history regardless of, sometimes it's colored history, sometimes it's kind of bland, but Steve just released a really great new volume that's coming out or is out for the Missouri Lodge of Research, and it's all about Ray Denslow, one of the most prolific Masons of his time and probably ever, and it's the first volume. And so if you are a member of the Missouri Lodge of Research, you get that book. It's just that easy. So go back a few weeks, or just check in the show notes and I'll actually have a link to download the petition for the Missouri Lodge of Research. No, you don't have to live in Missouri to be a member of the Masonic Lodge of Research in Missouri. It's a pretty premier organization. They do a lot. They publish stuff. They're probably one of the most active and one of the best in the world. So check it out. That's it for this week. I hope you enjoyed. I am recording this just before flying out to Kansas to present for the Kansas Lodge of Research. Really excited to go. And by the time you're listening to this, I'm done and probably heading home or am home already. But I do want to send a big thanks out to Brother Alex Powers of the Historical Light podcast, who was my host there at the Kansas Lodge of Research, and his wonderful family, all of the brothers who came out, especially those who did a little road trip to get there. So until next week, stay on the level. For Whence Came You, I'm Robert Johnson.
You've been listening to Whence Came You, a Masonic podcast featuring research papers and discussions related to Freemasonry with your host, Brother Robert Johnson. Be sure to join us for our next edition.